Welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. Here we'll talk to the leaders in technology, culture, business, and the arts. We'll cover politics, advocacy, motherhood, writing, mental health, and mostly we'll focus on hope. Join Kim B. Davis, author, playwright, radio personality, event consultant, professional speaker on the Kim B. Davis Show. Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. I'm your host, Kim B. Davis, and this evening we have one of our favorite podcasters, Mr. Eric Harp. He is our certified professional fitness trainer, and he is also one of our favorite guests to come on and tell us how to get healthy and talk shop about politics. Good evening, Mr. Harp. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. How are you, Mrs. Davis?
I am wonderful. So tonight I want to talk a little bit about something different, and my title is Getting Fit While We Are Going Through an Injury or During an Injury. But before we talk about fitness, we have to talk politics. So the first thing that I want to talk about, because there's so much going on, is this little topic called critical race theory. You want to tell us what that is?
This little bitty topic. You know what, Mrs. Davis, I don't know if anybody in your listening audience has ever heard of it. Excuse me. Critical race theory. It's commonly known as CRT. And in truth, what it is a law school curriculum. Law school, something that some advanced learning. Other than that, it's not available. It's not available for other curricula. Yet, a lot of people in our circles, in our media circles, in our social media circles, are taking this critical race theory course from law school and selling it to the rest of the world by fear that is coming to an elementary school near them, or coming to an elementary school near you and I. And that fear has many of our population up in arms.
Yes.
About our racial standings in this country, no matter who you are, white or black. And I'm sure that a person like yourself is way up in the news. And you may have heard some locally here in this time of 2021 that there were some people in California that were arrested for plotting to do some damage to the California Capitol in Sacramento.
I heard a little bit about it. Will you tell us some more about that?
Well, these men were arrested with an arsenal. I mean, handguns, assault rifles, other forms of weaponry and mass destruction. And on their person was also found a white privilege card. This white privilege card was their Monopoly get out of jail free card. And it said in stamped, professionally made letters, white privilege card. good for from birth to death.
We can't make this up.
Cannot make this up. And I was like, and they carried this in their wallets? But just some of the levels, I mean, I find it comical, but it's a real thing and can't discount it. It's a real thing. It just when you think you're somewhere, you find out you're nowhere.
When you think you have scraped the bottom of the barrel, you realize, oh, wait,
it's deeper.
More. Yes. And what is frightening is how deep it is. And I don't think anyone knows that.
So with critical race theory, in short, being at its law school curriculum. That course goes a little deeper. They find precedent, court cases, and things, and finds out how the court has progressed or not progressed, and how some of our great leaders and some of the things that they have said on record come to light.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the actions that are taken by our establishment, our government, over our history,
Mm-hmm.
it's all documented. And these are court cases, court precedent, things that set precedent for the next case. And because all of these things are made available through law school, legal research, things are coming to light,
Mm-hmm.
as they should.
Mm-hmm.
But there are forces and powers that be that don't want these things to come to light, and they don't want this information available to the masses. So it's available to law students, but to the masses, we'll make it a little more difficult. All said and done, it's eye-opening.
Mm-hmm.
There are many people who are selling it to be, the eyes that will be opened will ensure that young white children will find out that they are inherently racist,
Mm-hmm.
or systematically racist, as the word goes now.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that it's just fear-mongering.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line is fear-mongering. It's just another tactic in order to preserve a way of life that should have been gone a long time ago.
Absolutely.
But never is. But critical race theory, in short, it's only available in law school, and it's for the upper academia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you're not trying to be in the upper academia, you may not have to worry about it.
Unless you are one of these people who watches Fox News or something, who believes that, the big bad, as you call it, the CRT, is coming to your school district. Now, it goes back sort of to this thread of ignorance that we hear in America. People will say, don't go to college. You go to college, they brainwash you. That's what's wrong with all those liberal schools. They lying to you. They telling you stuff, and you're like, well, wait a minute. No, they teach you how to think critically, because not everybody gets that in elementary school, middle school, and in high school. And if you don't know how to think critically, how do you participate in government? How do you participate in elections? How do you participate when we have big situations like a coronavirus that is ravaging our nation, and we're having a debate over whether to get vaccinated or not? And this isn't a conversation about the benefit of getting vaccinated. However, it's interesting to me that we have this conversation, and some of the arguments on both sides are interesting. And I'm like, well, where's the critical thinking? It's not there. It's all emotional. It's all emotional. I'm afraid it's poison. I'm not putting that in my body. But then I'm thinking, but you eat McDonald's, and I'm not criticizing McDonald's. But when you see a hamburger on YouTube that doesn't age or break down for months, to me, when you start to talk about poisons, I don't know that you necessarily have a good understanding. And I'm not criticizing anybody. If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's your personal business. If you decide to get vaccinated, that's your personal business. I get that. However, we saw George Floyd murdered on live television. Since then, we have seen Ahmaud Arbery murdered on live television. We've seen the video. We've heard the statements. Eric, you know, we watch and you'll call me and say, "Did you see the video and such and such?" And I'll say, "Yeah, did you see the video and such and such?" We see these all the time. We hear states that are pushing for extreme voting restrictions on the population. And I understand now that if you've had a stroke or you're disabled, some of the restrictions that would not allow you to vote would impact seniors. So again, that it becomes critical thinking. Why not have an educated populace versus segmenting everyone and keeping them apart? And I understand that that's a strategy, but keeping them apart and keeping them fighting at each other as, and I'm a sci-fi nut. You know, when they say in sci-fi, well, do a little distraction over here so no one sees what you're doing over there. And
Right.
and this is what it really feels like. And I'm wondering, for me, why do you keep pushing this narrative? I know the answer to that, but go ahead, Mr. Harp, answer that
Well,
question.
listen, I smiled, I giggled at a few points that you made because they were valid points. And listen, critical race theory, critical,
Mm-hmm.
it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, you have to be able to critique it, break it down.
Yes.
Now, we say race theory, critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
And you said critical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
which is also another course,
Mm-hmm.
separate.
Mm-hmm.
Just learn how to think
Mm-hmm.
critically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's again academia. Um, upper academia, upper education is a privilege. Um, we all have a mandate that we have to go through 12 years of, or 12 grades
Yes.
of school in
Mm-hmm.
order to get a high school diploma, in order to further our education.
Mm-hmm.
Law says at 16, you can drop out with no penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can drop out at any time, but
Mm-hmm.
around 16, drop out, no penalty. You can go back and get a GED. There's lots of different options in order to fulfill certain criterias for education.
Mm-hmm.
We have community colleges, um, we have smaller universities, online universities, different things in which you can obtain degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Now, then there's further education, which you go for masters, PhDs, whether you're in the arts and sciences, whether you're there's a plethora of ways to go.
Mm-hmm.
But that's upper education, and then it becomes a little weeding out process. There are those that are further educated,
Mm-hmm.
and there are some doors that are open for those that are further educated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, those that go through those doors, hey, they kind of look back and say, there's not a lot of people through these doors.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get through those doors, well, now you get into the other doors,
Yeah.
and there's some other doors that you can go through that not a lot of people are able to go through. It's
Mm-hmm.
a filtering out process.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's a privilege. Upper academia, upper education is a process and a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And those that obtain this this particular height, have definitely achieved something. It's worthy. Some titles may change.
Mm-hmm.
You can now become officially titled doctor,
Correct. Mm-hmm.
and hold social status. Again, there's a lot of different lawyer. You can become judge. There's a lot of different things that you can obtain
Mm-hmm.
through upper education.
Mm-hmm.
And this critical race theory is only available to some of those that that aspire for this upper education.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone should have some critical thinking.
Yes.
Now, everybody should be able to discern right from wrong, good from evil. Not everybody can,
Mm-hmm.
everybody should.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of our powers that be rely on groupthink. They rely on the people that, you know, rather stay with the group than think individually.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there is a plan, but that plan can only be carried out once these groups emerge or
Mm-hmm.
are put into those groups, and then logistically speaking, then the country can then run.
Mm-hmm.
Now, based upon that, because you have to have your workers, you have to have your people who manage those workers, you have to have the people who manage those people who manage. So there's that hierarchy. And, you know, just like in any company, you have your upper management, your middle management, you have your workers.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to move up freely can be through education.
Exactly.
Now, if I may,
Please.
You and I have had a conversation. You might have had a conversation about some of our past during this critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
Case in point, we talked a little bit about our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Lincoln gets the credit for freeing the slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
wonderful accomplishment. However, for those who go and read and learn some of his speeches, these things that you may learn during critical race theory classes, some of the words, some of the breakdowns, some of the things that are around that time of the 1860s and the Civil War. And it wasn't just what our books tell us that the North versus the South, North won, move on.
Right.
To the Reconstruction period. That's not how it worked. There were many things that were going on in the way our Congress and the way our states worked together. There was the Union and then the Confederacy. And the states of the Union worked together. The states of the Confederacy worked together. So there were two different countries. And that one president, Abraham Lincoln, who had to put everything together, or who tried to put everything together, had to make some economic decisions. And some of those economic decisions didn't go over too well.
Right.
And so he was quoted as saying, for the good of the Union, that if he could save the Union and not free one slave, he would do it.
Absolutely.
And if he could save the Union and free all the slaves, he would do that too. He also said if he could save the Union and free some of the slaves and leave the other slaves intact, he would do that too. Now, when you break it down, well, that's not really out of love. That's done. Listen, it was done, but it wasn't done by the altruism of the heart. No, it was done because the war is a financial toll on both sides, and the North needs little money more than the South.
Right.
You know, so the South was making money off of free labor. So they cut that out. So no free labor. But then the Black person couldn't work.
Exactly.
Not get paid for it. So here we are now. We set up our social nets again. You got your poor, your middle class, you got your upper class. The poor can work for the middle class can work for the poor, or vice versa. Listen, what I'm saying is that there's your hierarchies. And the people that were left out were the newly freed slaves. But what you gonna do with them? Well, you better do something with them because they 3/5 worth the people. So in order to get senators and congressmen. They needed representation.
Mm-hmm.
They needed population.
Mm-hmm.
And so each Black person, and I think it was just man, so maybe I don't know if the person, but 3/5, each Black man was 3/5
of a person. Yes.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, established the 3/5 doctrine,
Mm-hmm.
which was also published as to why it was to be what it was. And all of these things are in our Library of Congress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
These are all documents. These are all speeches that can be found on the internet, found in the Library of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Takes just a quick search.
Mm-hmm.
But for upper academia, we're steered that way, or it's steered that way.
Mm-hmm.
Not for elementary schools, not for high schools, not in the way that the media is scaring folks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree. It's funny because it reminds me of when we were kids. And I was instructed, as I'm very sure that you were too, Eric, you had to read the newspaper. You couldn't just read the comics or the sports pages.
Right.
You had to read the news pages. And I'll tell you, my parents were like, okay, now report back what you read. And don't just tell me what you read. You need to form an opinion about it. And I remember being in 7th and 8th grade going, okay, I don't really care about this, but okay, let me get this right. Because if I don't, I'm not going to be able to go outside and play because then I'm going to have to listen to my parents talk about why I have to have an opinion. So, you focus. You was like, okay, let me get it together. I think that for many people, and specifically for people that are not Black African American folk, you have the luxury to go through life, and this is not a condemnation, without having to be concerned about certain things. You
Okay.
know, in the Black community, we have to give our children the talk, which means we have to instruct them on how to deal with police, how to deal with, as the narrative goes right now, the new Karens, who are calling the police. There was one yesterday. This guy was I think he was in Walmart, and this white woman accused him of stealing her son's phone. And this child happened to leave his phone in his car, in their car. I guess somehow or another, the child went back to the vehicle, found the phone was in there. The man who she accused of stealing it was like, okay, so you've called the police, you've got all store security and everybody here. There was no apology. And he said, and what's your name? And she said some expletives to him and basically brushed him off as if he wasn't worthy. And so when we talk about critical race theory, many people are afraid. And I've read accounts from other people who say, I don't want my children to believe that our country is racist because it's not. I don't want my children to read about the Ruby Bridges story and understand that that little girl had to go through all of that. That makes me uncomfortable. Well, history often does make us uncomfortable. And whether we're talking about American history, whether we're talking about the Holocaust, whether we're talking about the Crusades, whether we're talking about any nation conquering another nation, we could go and talk about the Vietnam War. I'm quite sure that when we look at the atrocities there, none of us would say, ooh, they were having a good time in the Vietnam War. No, they will say, ooh, it was brutal. It was war. It is interesting to me that we cannot have a conversation about how to treat people fairly and equitably without bringing into race. Because again, it goes back to the same trope that many have heard and has been indoctrinated into this nation. Thomas Jefferson is a perfect example. He wrote about freedom, yet he owned slaves. Now,
Freedom, and if I may,
yes.
freedom for that particular
Group of people.
group of people
Yes.
was freedom from the tyranny
Yes.
of
And religious
a
persecution.
king.
Yes. Yes.
Freedom from a tyranny of a king and a pope. A king and a pope. Two positions of authoritarianism. That's what we would label it today. So gaining freedom. We see this in our times today with the people of Cuba. And all they're asking is for freedom for Cuba, Cuba Libre. All they want is freedom. But here's the thing, Mrs. Davis, and this is a segue, and I'm so glad we talked. In our conversations, we talked about Abraham Lincoln and some of the speeches that he mentioned, and he pushed for colonization.
Yes.
Colonization. That was in all of our history books. It briefly talked about colonization and getting all of the Black people, African Americans, Negroes, according to the books, all together and putting them in one place.
That's right.
One place. Specifically, another island.
Yes. Yes.
Or another country. That was the goal of many of the powers that be of that time.
And why? Why? Do you remember what he said?
So that because Black people will never be equal to white people.
Exactly.
And so to avoid any conflicts from one race to another, because Black people will never be equal to white people, white people have God-given rights.
Right.
And so the Black people will never, ever be equal. And this is according to the words that Abraham Lincoln is quoted as saying. He says, I have, I never will. And he says, I don't, I never have, and I never will think that a Black man will be equal to a white man.
Yes.
And so with that, colonization, move them to an island, move them back to Africa, do something, but just get them away from here. And so here we have is an island of Black and brown people in Cuba. With the totalitarian, with a communist, authoritarian in the Castro. And they're fighting for freedom. And many people in this country, a lot of our big name Republicans and Democrats are making lots of headlines with some of the things that they are saying for their support of the Cuban people, or for they're talking about those who do support the Cuban. Now, of course, 62 years of an authoritarian regime.
Yes.
62 years. Now that goes through 6, 7, 10 presidents. The way our system is set up. Yet we're only blaming it on the last one. We're only blaming it on the skip Trump, blame it on Obama before him. That is only their faults. That Cuba and the Cuban people are where they are. So are we allies with Cuba, or what's our role in Cuba? And so now here's the thing. I watch many people, I listen to in my daily, I listen to people in their comments. We cheer the people of Cuba. We support their right to protest and revolt and do everything that we watch them doing on the internet and feel. But they're there. As long as they stay there, and as long as they stay there 90 miles off the coast, they can't get here. They can't invade our borders, and they can't come to America. So as long as we can cheer them from here, I got you. I support you. But on the other coast, those people from Mexico who are trying to escape their political regimes and what have you, who are not 90 miles separated by water, who are still on a land border. Well, they may have to cross that Rio Grande waters and Oh my goodness. The hypocrisy from our East Coast to West Coast. The hypocrisy about how we support the liberation of our Spanish-speaking brown people from Cuba, but we don't want any of our liberated brown Spanish-speaking people from Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's one of those double standards that just critical thinking.
Absolutely.
Like, can you see this? Can you see this?
But one of the great benefits of being an American is that we can have this conversation. We can talk about it openly in public amongst people. We can hold forums. In Cuba, they're fighting to be able to do that, because if you are too loud and too many people hear you, you could be arrested, you could be shot, you could be killed in many places. Now, and we talk about the border crisis. It's not just Mexico. We could talk about all of Central America. It seems is in some type of an uproar of some type of political upheaval, and even South America. And so it's interesting when we talk about freedom and we talk about giving people rights and giving people opportunities. But when people look like us, ask for those same freedoms, those same opportunities, those same um, places to speak and do the things that other people do, we're criticized for it. And an older friend of mine has often said, she said, Kim, I wish we could sit white people down and let them know we don't want what you have. We don't. We want to do the same things that you want to do. We want to have a home. We want our kids to be educated. We want to sit in our own space and enjoy life. What you have is yours. Let me have what I have is mine. But oftentimes, because Black people, specifically Black Americans, can have a little and do so much and then surpass other people. And then the question is, well, how did you do that? Because you clearly are not equal to me. You could not be smarter than me. How did you, that was the same question about President Barack Obama. Well, how did this man, first of all, he is Black and he grew up in Hawaii. Okay, that's where his family is from. And then he met
still the United States. I'm sorry.
Exactly. I had to argue that point with some people, and I was afraid. I said, some of y'all need some remedial education, because clearly you don't know how many states that we have, because you're acting like Hawaii is a foreign place. And the fact that his wife is an Ivy League, and people are saying, well, they just put her there. They didn't just put her there. She earned her way there. She's brilliant. What are we talking about? But it just goes back to show you that at the base of all of this is anger, resentment, jealousy, and fear. And fear above everything breeds just all kinds of hate. And that's what we're seeing. And so when you talk about critical race theory, it's breeding fear, which is breeding more and more hate because you don't understand it. And as you said, upper academia. If you won't go to school, and you won't pick up a book and read, and you won't turn on something that gives you critical thinking, then I don't know how we get to you, or how people inform you. And I'm not saying that we have everything correct, but we do know how to critical think. And
we should
we should, and be able to formulate our own opinion and know what's best for ourselves.
It's unfortunate. It's lack of exposure. Much of it is lack of exposure. And the sad cases, we all have devices. I'm talking to you through one of them. Mm-hmm. We have handheld devices. We have slightly bigger than handheld devices. Yeah. We have we have devices with keyboards. We have devices with remote controls. We are always connected and always plugged in. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's a thing called the internet, which allows us to reach around the world. This pandemic may have shut us in, but the internet and this Zoom technology has allowed us to conference call, to do many things. So we're always connected. There's nothing that we can't access. So our exposure is there.
Exactly.
But what we don't have is the tolerance as we get exposed to each other outside. You know, we get outside and we gravitate towards certain groups. We go to certain places where we only, you know, I don't want to talk in the famous vernacular with the we and the, but yeah. And we go places and we start thinking that this is where I belong, or I don't belong here. You know, this isn't where I belong. And we all have our human nature, you know, traits in which we gravitate to certain crowds that we like, or crowds where we're accepted. Now, education opens up that exposure. Today, in the 2020s, a lot of the younger generation are exposed a lot more than many of us would be. Today in 2021, we have gender lines that are crossed. We have social economic lines that are crossed. We have so many different lines that are smudged and, you know, that are not as distinct as they used to be for prior generations. And so you see lots of interracial couples, you see lots of younger transgenders going through their gender transformations in elementary school. You start seeing backlash against the religious institutions and the educational institutions, our legal institutions. There's backlash against all of this. Case in point, January 6th. Here we are, never seen anything like this. Yet our history books are whitewashing it already. And if we, as we're talking in this critical race theory, have to go back and try to find out how our country is portrayed in our history books, oh my goodness.
Exactly.
This January 6th insurrection, by the time it reaches the next group of kids, it's going to be like Disneyland. You know, like they went to a Disneyland to see the Capitol. And it was like they walked around and, oh my goodness, were wanting to hug the vice president around his neck with rope. You know, and so who knows what kind of fantasy it will be turned into, because today in front of our eyes, it is certainly being turned into what armed insurrection? They were friends who loved each other. In fact, the cops hugged who got beat up.
Exactly.
No. So, you know, it blows the mind, it boggles the mind on how our tragedies get turned into Shakespeare. You know, when it's like the difference between a smile and a frown is just that thing right here. You know, so it's amazing to me. And you know, going back full circle with critical race theory. The lawyers of the world, according to Shakespeare, was watch out for the lawyers of the world. You know, because they'll rob you blind. You know, and today, watch out. You know, listen, I know a lot of lawyers get bad raps. You know, you have the ambulance chasers, you have your people at the top representing, you know. But look, it's such a farce right now, because what we have is so many lawyers getting indicted for misuse of power, lying to the court, you know, going against their oath. You have politicians who are also have their JD, Juris Doctorates, legal degrees, going against their oath in the guise of politics. And so, you know, there's a certain speak within a courtroom. There's a certain decorum within a courtroom. And my last point is what we're seeing right now as some of the January 6th insurrectionists, rioters. There have been some arrests. There have been some legal proceedings. And there's been one who's just received a sentence. The first one who just received a sentence. He got a federal sentence of 8 months. A federal sentence of 8 months for sedition. Sedition is a horrible crime. Right. When you look it up in our legal books, you know, you don't get to sedition. It's not just a, it's not a easy crime to get to. But sedition, and my man got 8 months.
Right.
In our legal system, you can cry all you want about Bill Cosby got out early, but 8 months for being part of this insurrection in which they beat police officers over the head with flagpoles. This particular man who got a sentence carried said flagpole.
Wow.
You know, 8 months. I'm of the opinion that's a slap on the wrist.
I agree. I agree.
However, the judge makes the decision. I have to roll with it. Because I am also aware of many people who look just like myself who have gotten a lot more time for a lot less.
Exactly.
You know, walking into a CVS when they're closed is a lot different than walking into the Capitol.
That's a good analogy. That's very good analogy. Yeah.
Walking into a CVS when they're closed and getting 5 years is a whole lot different than breaking into the Capitol looking for people while they're handling official business.
Exactly.
And only getting 8 months.
Right. Building a gallows, threatening to kill people, killing a police officer, Officer Brian Sicknick. Cannot forget to say his name because he was an officer.
I mean, this is now the thing played out on national television.
It sure did.
You and I can watch the same tape over and over and over and over again. One thing we cannot deny is that it happened on national television.
That's right.
You know, we can say what we see. You see the one in the green shirt? No. You see the one in the blue shirt? No. You see the one in the red shirt? We can do all of that because we can see the same thing, but concentrate on different angles. But we just can't deny that we're watching the same thing.
Absolutely.
And that's where we are today. You know, and it's horrible.
It is. You know, I know some people that were in DC that day who we were concerned about. And I saw the tape of staffers who were running to offices trying to barricade doors. And as a former staffer for a politician, you go different places, you see people, you engage with people, and you never know. And up until that day, you couldn't have told me that that would have happened. Now, having seen that and having read additional articles from different Black political leaders around the country, who one was quoted as saying she was leaving office because she was threatened to be Gifford. So you remember the congresswoman out west who was shot in the head? So someone threatened her and said, we will Gifford you, meaning we will do exactly what happened to that person. We shall do that to you.
Wow.
That's where we are in America. It's very, very scary. But it's important to have conversations like this because, as you often say, our largest muscle in our body is our brain. So to flex it, critical thinking, like that segue, critical thinking helps to keep that muscle supple and helps it to grow and develop. And, you know, this is sort of a side point, but we have this increase in Alzheimer's and dementia. And a lot of people are trying to figure out, honestly, how can I prevent Alzheimer's? And, you know, diseases come as people get older. But a lot of times what they tell you is you have to flex that muscle. So keep reading, keep thinking, keep learning new tasks, doing new things so that muscle can continue. And then the rest of your body can follow behind it.
You know, there are times where I have to just giggle because when I was younger, And I would say, Mom, Dad, Granny, y'all so out of touch.
Yeah.
I get with it. And here I am, like with my children, your children, our children, like, and I'm looking at them like, let me tell you a little something. This is how I used to be. Let me tell you a little something. This is how we used to be. And we get a kick out of it. But in all seriousness, reading is put to the wayside. Mm-hmm. Now we can read right now in emojis and half words, we can read in OMGs, and we can read in LOLs and tell you what they mean. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to really reading, really breaking down words, really taking a novel and breaking it down, there's many people complaining about the novel To Kill a Mockingbird. Mm-hmm. There's many people complaining about certain books within the curriculum. But reading, I remember commercials, books, fairs. Mm-hmm. Reading is fundamental.
Yes.
Reading is fundamental. It is something that you have to be able to do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I remember the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Exactly.
We're off of that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't even think there's 1 R. I think the only R is replying, replying to posts and texts. My point is that there are many young kids right now who cannot write their name, can't write in cursive, can't sign their name at all. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, just wait till big business get a load of that.
Exactly.
Wait until banks get a load of that. Can't even sign your name on a document that's supposed to have your name on it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You ain't gonna be able to thumbprint everything.
Right.
So reading is fundamental. There are so many skills that are lacking. We're sitting here worried about critical race theory. How about let's get together with just some math classes? Mm-hmm. That we get together with teaching, because that new math, why do we have to have a new math? 1 + 1 = 2.
Every day, all day. Every day, all day.
A negative times a negative equals you have to learn these things. And it's just a shame. And I will come into contact with people who can't sign their names. I'm like, you're grown, you're 20s, can't sign your name. Mm-hmm. 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 It's a shame. It's a shame how far we've fallen in the name of progress.
Absolutely.
And that, and it just goes everywhere we are. Mm-hmm. So critical thinking. First, let's get that part before we just start thinking of race, religion. There's commercials that are saying question everything. Mm-hmm. Question everything. Well, yeah, question everything without a why. Why do I have to do it? Why are you talking to me? Mm-hmm. How does it work? Why did that happen? Why does the sun rise? Why does it rain when it gets cloudy? Let's figure that kind of stuff out. Why does the ozone layer? Let's figure that kind of stuff out. Mm-hmm. Instead of, why did you say what you said on social media? Let me stop teasing. I think we're all gonna come together. I mean, it has to work. There are some people who are looking to keep things status quo. Mm-hmm. There are some people who are looking to keep things the way that they are in order so they can maintain power. But power, nothing lasts forever. And liberation, all these people seeking liberation, it's gonna happen. Mm-hmm. Castros can't live forever. Exactly. That if we can find a way to get Bezos and Branson to the moon, that 90-mile trip will be cut down. It can be cut down if the right people wanted it cut down. Cuba could be a lot closer and a lot more accessible. And what a better for a world it could be.
Absolutely. Well said.
Please forgive me for my rant, Mrs. Davis. Thank you. Thank you.
No. You know, we appreciate your rants here at the Kim B. Davis Show, but we got to talk a little bit of fitness. So,
Okay.
you know, it is summer.
Yes.
A lot of people are training for marathons, and I'm hearing complaints of ankle issues, foot problems like plantar fasciitis or heel problems. And people are saying, oh, you know, I only have a couple more months till this marathon, but I'm injured, but I need to continue to work. What, first off, should people work out and continue to get fit while they're injured? And if so, if the answer is yes, what are some stretching exercises that people can do specifically to help themselves not get any more injured, if that makes sense?
Well, I appreciate your question. Let's see if we could break it down. We would love to stretch. In fact, we have to stretch to avoid injury. Stretch. But here's the thing, we want to warm up. Warm up. Now, warm up doesn't have to be a full exercise, but warm up just to get that heartbeat going. Okay, for some of us, it's got to do some jumping jacks, jump around a little bit. If the space permits, yeah, do some jumping jacks, get a light sweat, feel that heartbeat going, feel that breath going. Start warming up a little bit, then stretch. Stretch, get those muscles nice and stretched. And the reason we do this is so that we can avoid injury, okay? Stretching keeps us limber, of course. Lets us find out where we are. Like stretch, oh, now we go. My back's a little tight, my legs a little tight, okay? So that's what we wanna do. We wanna find out where we are. Now, once we stretch, now we can get into our exercise. Little more exertion, little more intense, so to speak. Now, again, this is all based upon our activity levels. Well, I'm not the one to assess that, over the internet like that, but based on our activity levels, then we want to exert some energy. If you can walk. If you can add a little jog with your walk, do it. Okay. If you can jog for any long distance, do that as well. For those that are able to swim, have access to water, use it. Swimming is one of the best cardio and physical exercises that we can get into. Utilizes our entire body. But these exercises, there's a plethora of exercises that we can do. And after we finish the exercises, then we would like to stretch again. Okay? Now, in a perfect world, this is what we'd like to do. These are to avoid injuries. But sometimes injuries do happen. Now, there's different levels of injury. There's hurt. That hurt. And then there's injured. You cannot go. Okay? Right. Now, I would recommend don't play with your body like that. Okay. If you're feeling something that's bothering you, go see a doctor. Okay. Go see a doctor and get it diagnosed and let the doctor tell you what to do with it. Sports injuries can be some of the most nagging injuries because if you don't know how you got it and don't know how to make it go, oh my goodness. Things like heel spurs, plantar fasciitis, wow, metatarsalgia. These are foot problems that are very painful. Very painful, can affect the way you walk. And once that affects the way you walk, over time will affect your hip. Once it affects your hip or your knees and affects the way that you, oh my goodness, they have far-reaching problems. So I would recommend that we go see the doctor. Okay. I don't recommend working out during any type of injuries. Okay. because it only gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
Working out during an injury is not going to make the injury better. It's going to make it a little worse. So take that time. There are things we can do while we take that time. You can continue to stretch, work this muscle right here, flex that muscle. You know, it doesn't have to be over the phone. You can flex that muscle with some crossword puzzles and some books and what have you. But one of the things is to avoid depression, because from here leads to the physical.
Exactly.
And it can be easy to get depressed by not being able to do some of the things we want to do. The pandemic easily showed us that. That lack of physical activity allowed some of us to gain unwanted pounds. Those unwanted pounds are a little harder to get off now, which causes a little more depression, which causes a little more reason to not go. And so it becomes a cycle. Now, exercise can help break that cycle and establish a new cycle. But injuries, we definitely want to avoid pulled muscles, torn muscles. We want to avoid, we want to build stronger muscles. We want to build that area so we don't twist those ankles. We want to build those muscles so that when we walk up the stairs, we can get all the way to the top. We want to build those muscles so that when we wear those high heel shoes, that those calves pop. You know,
Exactly.
we want to wear, you know, we want to work out. You know, we all have goals. We have body goals. We all have things upon ourselves that we would like to make some changes to, adjustments to, or what have you. And that's human nature, and that's fine. Find a plan, find a trainer. Let's get to it. However, injuries, please stick with your doctors and be open about your injuries. If your back is hurting today, it's time to rest. Your body's telling you something. If your wrist is not, it's time to rest. Let's try not to go ahead and get that workout in on Friday just because I got to do it on Friday. No, we don't want to injure ourselves more. And I hope this is answering your question, because, you know, there are people who try to do everything and push through everything, but without medical advice or without the proper professional advice, they wind up hurting themselves more. And the internet, person like myself, can tell you all day without diagnosing, but without someone who's properly trained to diagnose and to treat what it is we have. Because metatarsalgia is a whole different thing than plantar fasciitis, even though they're close to where it hurts on the foot. You know, and plantar fasciitis can, is it closer to the middle, the ball of the foot, or in the heel of the foot? You know, where are we talking? And then you have different kind of funguses, and you have different types of ingrown toes, and you have hammer toes, and you have different kind of things that, oh, I thought it was something else.
And if you've ever had an ingrown toenail before, you're like, oh, what is that? And then you realize it's an ingrown toenail, and you're like, oh my goodness, I thought it was something, and it was an ingrown.
You thought it was something different, and only a doctor will be able to tell. And I know that some of us Black and brown people, you know, have a history of not wanting to go to the doctors, not being able to go to the doctors. You know, there's many reasons we don't see doctors, and I'm not just limited it to African Americans. There are many people all over the country, as we noticed with the vaccination situation. There are many people who refuse to see doctors. There's many people whose insurances are just not up to date and are not able to see doctors. And so we go through it. I had a client today come in and ask me, come into the gym today and asked me to set him up with some exercises.
Okay.
Something where he didn't hurt his shoulder too much because it was hurting him and giving him problems. And his doctor told him he needed surgery, but he didn't want to get surgery. So how can I do some exercises without? And I'm as straight faced as I can. I said, well, I'd recommend that you see that doctor, because if your range of motion is only right here, I don't have any exercise that's going to improve that area without you being able to expand your, or attempt to expand your range of motion. I'm not giving you something that's just going to take you to the brink of your injury. It's not my, I can't do that. I can't do that. So I asked them, listen, you're free to work out, on your own, but I recommend that you go to the doctor. See a doctor, and if he recommends surgery, follow the recommendation. If you choose not to have surgery, then you choose to take the ramifications, You take all the releases. I can't do anything for you right now. I'm so sorry. And I had to let him know. And it's an older gentleman. It's an older gentleman, advanced age. And listen, working out is for everyone.
Yeah.
Exercise is for everyone, all ages. And do what you can do. And do what you can do. And it will get better. It will get easier. And again, no matter what age you are, it's never too late to start.
Excellent. So one last question, Mr. Harp. So if we do, so I remember being in elementary and high school where we would do full body stretches. So you would take your hands, raise them all the way to the sky, and then touch your toes. Is that a good stretch?
There are. Oh, definitely. Reaching for the sky and bending over and touching your toes. I mean, it's one of our basic stretches. Okay. Reaching for the sky is going to stretch your back and your shoulders and your upper body all the way. Your arms, your neck, your chest is going to get that reach. All this stretch.
Okay.
And as we bend over towards our toes, well, now we're stretching those legs, the back of the legs, the glutes, the butt muscles, that lower back muscle. And you can hear your breathing go, ah. Happens to all of us.
Okay.
Breathe through it. You don't feel that stretch. Stay there for a moment. Come back up. Now spread those legs and do it again. Okay. And now you can stretch towards your left leg, towards the middle, towards the right. These stretches, they get easier over time, but they will stretch their entire body stretches. And then once you're doing that, sit down on the floor and do it again. Sit down and reach for your toes. Lay down and bring your feet towards you now. Instead of bending over towards your feet, lay back and bring your feet towards you. Stretch your back. Okay? Here's one good one. Hold your arms out to the side, just like this, while you're laying on your back.
Okay.
Bring your knees up towards your chest. Keep your shoulders on the ground, right? And take your knees to the right and to the left. Keep those shoulders on the ground, but just twist those knees from one side to the other side and feel that stretch. Okay. You'll feel that back stretch. You'll feel that midsection stretch, okay? At the same time, look the opposite direction of your knees. So if your knees are this way, turn your head this way. And if your knees are that way, turn your head this way, all while your shoulders are on the ground. And I'm sorry I had to do the small screen to show you where we are, but just laying on your back, doing that exercise right there, you will be amazed at how good that stretch feels. Okay.
See, and that was why I asked that question. So thank you, Mr. Harp.
Quite welcome, Mr. Davis.
Thank you again for coming on and talking to us about getting fit while injured and talking to us about critical race theory. Very, very important topic. Tell us how we can find you, Mr. Harp. Tell us where you are on social media and your email address.
Well, you can find me ESQ360. Now I'm on your Facebook, your Twitter, Eric Harp 9 at Gmail. Go ahead, send me a message, any inquiries or questions. Love to hear from you. Mrs. Davis, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Oh my goodness. The history we have.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. Hey, not everyone knows, but I'm gonna share.
Okay, go ahead.
This was your birthday month, this past month. Yes. I wanted to say happy birthday to you. Thank you for letting me be a part of your birthday celebration.
Thank you so much.
You know what I'm talking about.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Mr.
And peace to the
Harp. I love
Davis
you.
family. Yes.
Thank you so much, guys. So just to let you in on the secret, you know, Mr. Harp is also an actor and a model, and he did an LL Cool J performance for me. And anyone that knows me knows that "I'm Bad" is one of my theme songs, and so you know I relished in that moment. So it was a wonderful birthday.
Make them say go LL and do the what?
It was wonderful, wonderful. But
Right.
thank you, Mr. Hart, for coming on. Thank you for the birthday wishes. It truly has been a great month. And I had a wonderful birthday surrounded by people that I love and in good health, eating good food and doing fun things, keeping my mind together, keeping my body together. That is a wonderful thing. And that is the blessing, one of the blessings that we can ask for in life. So again, thank you for being on the show. Thank you guys for tuning into the Kim B. Davis Show. You know, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and LinkedIn. And if I find a karaoke channel where I can do LL Cool J, I may record it where you can see it. But until that day, it's Kimberly Bachelor Davis. Bachelor is spelled Batchelor. You know, you can see this show on youtube.com/Kimberly Bachelor Davis. You can hear us on Apple, Spotify, Google, and Stitcher. You can find out more about me as an author at kimbdavis.com. Thank you again. We hope you'll join us on our next show. And as always, remember, be magnificent.